Defense officials in the U.S. are now voicing ongoing concerns about the possibility, anyway, of a terrorist attack led by the group known as ISIS-K in and around the airport in Afghanistan, in the capital of Kabul. The U.S. believes ISIS-K, which is an affiliate of ISIS, could carry out multiple attacks at the airport simply to create more chaos, death, and mayhem. It's a branch of the terror group, of course, ISIS first emerging in Syria and Iraq, but has long had an operational capability in Afghanistan and has long been an enemy of the Taliban as well. On Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden acknowledged the growing threat that the ISIS group poses to the airport, and it gets worse. More than 100 inmates at prisons in Afghanistan loyal to ISIS have reportedly escaped near Kabul as the Taliban advance toward the capital. All right, for more on this, Jeanne Meserve is my guest, CTV News security analyst. She is in Colorado Springs today. Jeanne, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Your read on what we're seeing now. It's been 10 days. About 82,000 people have been rescued out of Afghanistan. That's a significant number, but many, many more still hoping to get out.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear Secretary Blinken say that the Taliban had made commitments beyond August 31st to help extricate both Americans and Afghans who might be in peril. So it's clear that although they're sticking to that August 31 date, they are also setting the stage for further operations after that, or cooperation beyond that. The reason they're sticking to that August 31st date appears to be that threat from ISIS-K that you mentioned. The president has cited it. Blinken just cited it moments ago. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, says the threat is real. It is persistent. And we're hearing this morning that the U.S. has a specific threat stream that it is following. That is, in an odd way, potentially good news, because it means they can track that threat stream and hopefully take action to thwart whatever ISIS-K might be planning.
As if this wasn't complicated enough, Jeanne, obviously you're dealing with the Taliban itself and you're dealing with ISIS. There's still al-Qaeda, trying to get people out, trying to make sure they don't, use this as a target of opportunity to strike back against the West and the Taliban as well. Meantime, you're trying to figure out how to get people out safely and that they're not left behind, marooned, so to speak, in Afghanistan as well. What do you think, from your point of view, the best case scenario is here?
Well, that is a very tough question, and one that obviously the entirety of the United States government is coping with at this point in time. And frankly, not being a military analyst, I'm a little reluctant to give my point of view. I would just say clearly the more people they can get out of there before the 31st, the better we will be. Apparently, the Taliban has been cooperating to date to a large degree, although we have heard reports of people being prevented from getting to the airport. But the more people we can get on the transports now and get out to other countries, the better off we'll be.
It's remarkable to think just how many of the cards the Taliban now holds, Jeanne, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's also interesting to contemplate ISIS-K and the threat that they may pose. Listen, the Taliban is trying right now to establish its authority, to put together a government, and if this rival group, which is a sworn enemy of the Taliban, is able to carry something off, be it a suicide bomber in the midst of the crowds outside the airport, or a mortar attack on the runways, or a missile attack on the aircraft, not only would that be devastating for the United States and for the Afghans who would be affected and the U.S. citizens who might be injured or killed, but it clearly also would be a very, very serious blow to the Taliban itself.
I know that there was an Afghan national intelligence agency that for years, Jeanne, was helping the United States and others with information about these groups such as ISIS and al-Qaeda and their operations, and trying to stop them and shut them down before they were operational. Of course, that Afghan intelligence agency is really no longer functioning, and so therefore the U.S. is trying to figure out this in something of a vacuum, which makes it even more risky.
It is very difficult to do, and look at the situation going forward. We already have reports that jihadis from all around the world are coming to Afghanistan and are reinvigorated by what they've seen happen in Afghanistan. And how is the U.S. going to be collecting intelligence? We will not have an embassy there. We will not have a military there. Yes, we'll have technical assets that we can deploy. There are drones, there are overflights, there is satellite imagery. But I was talking to a former CIA station chief in Pakistan just last week who was saying the real key to using that technology successfully is to have human intelligence, to have people on the ground who can tell you where to look and can tell you what decisions are being made. And it looks quite likely that we are going to have very few, if any, human resources on the ground after the 31st.
I'm also curious to get your assessment on the possibility of some people kind of being able to, get out of Afghanistan when in fact they could themselves be threats. Is that overblown?
Well, I think that there are certainly people in the United States who disagree with the administration, who are trying very hard to portray some of the Afghans who are coming out of Afghanistan as potential terrorist threats. As I understand it, most of the people who are coming out have documentation or they are children. And they have gone through a vetting process. This SIV process, one of the reasons it has been so slow is that they have been very carefully trying to go through the backgrounds of each one of these individuals and ensure that they do not pose any kind of terrorist threat. Is the system perfect? Likely it is not, but it is a really honest and hard effort to weed out any potential threats before they would leave Afghanistan. Let me say there were many other reasons why the SIV visa process was slow, but one of them is that they were carefully looking at the backgrounds of each one of these individuals.
Jeanne Meserve is CTV News' security analyst joining us today from Colorado Springs. Great to have you on the story, Jeanne, as always.
Thank you. Good to be with you.